These are the scenes in Rochdale on December 21st, 1994, during the final night of celebrations to mark the 150th anniversary of the founding of the modern-day co-op.
Stand there, lad. Are you opening up or what?
The Rochdale Equitable Pioneer Society is now open for business.
We might not have as much stock as other shops. Well, not yet anyway. But what we have is pure. There's no adulteration and there's no short measures.
"150 years ago, travellers from Yorkshire to Lancashire looking west will have seen Rochdale nestling in the lee of the Pennine slopes. Considerably smaller then, Rochdale was, in the middle of the 19th century, a hive of industry. It was a place of toil, grime and poverty. In 1844, a grey pallor hung over the town, the result of thousands of chimneys belching smoke. Now most are gone, and the few remaining standing silent. This is where it all began. The little shop in Toad Lane, which has come to symbolise the cradle of the cooperative movement.
Welcome to Toad Lane. If you say Rochdale to people today, they say, oh yes, it used to be a cotton town. Quite right. But originally, of course, it was a woolen town, specialising in the weaving of flannel. They were weaving flannel here from about 1322. Now, we're going back to the 1840s, known as the Hungry Forties. There was a big debate in the House of Commons in 1841, and the MP for Rochdale, Mr. Sherman Crawford, took the plight of the Rochdalians to the House. He explained that there were 3,000 people living on less than 1 and 10 a week, 136 living on sixpence, 200 living on 10p, 508 living on a shilling, 855 on 1 and 6, and the rest on 1 and 10p. 85 people just had no blankets at all, and 40-odd people only had chaff beds. Shopkeepers and owners of small mills used to adulterate their food to make more profit, of course. They used to put sand in the oatmeal, plaster of Paris and chalk in the flour, iron filings and leaves from the trees in the tea. Life was very hard. And they also put blobs of lead on the scales so that you didn't even get your full weight of this absolutely awful food. So that was just a little bit of the background and the reasons why these 28 men got together to start up a cooperative in Rochdale.
This group photograph shows some of the original 28 pioneers. These particular men are considered to have had the greatest input, contributing to the success of the business.
They used to meet at the Socialist Institute, which was next door to the Weavers' Arms on Yorkshire Street. And on Sunday afternoons, they used to meet at the home of James Smithies, because on Sunday mornings, the collectors used to go out to pick up the tuppences that each member contributed towards the start of the business. They finally managed to save £28, which they decided was enough to start a business. Then, of course, they had to start looking around for premises. They had a great deal of trouble in finding somewhere to start, because every shopkeeper that they went to had an empty shop, of course didn't want to know them. Go away, we don't want this new co-op in these premises. Then they finally came across this building, which was originally a woolen warehouse, and it dates back to 1790. They went along to see the landlord, Dr. Dunlop, but in the first interview he just did not want to know them. They went a second time, and this time he noted that Charles Howth was one of them. Charles was very well known in the town. He used to get on his soapbox on all sorts of occasions, and he said, I don't want to know you men, but I will rent that bottom floor only to you, Charles Howth, for 3 years at £10 a year, and you can do your own shop fitting. So they knew they wouldn't get a better offer, so they took it, and in they came. So we come to the 21st of December, 1844. It was a dark, cold night. There was a big crowd of people waiting outside because, of course, word of mouth had gone round that the new store was going to open. The men inside, of course, were getting rather nervous. They'd never kept shop before, and all the noise going on outside was just a little bit much. They should have opened at 8 o'clock. But, of course, it was all nudge, nudge, you do, and in the end, nobody did. So James Smithy said, come on, lads, if we don't open now, the night's going to be over. Who's going to take the shutters down? Well, of course, nobody would. So out he went, and he took the shutters down, and he left the shop door open. Well, there was quite a press forward of the crowd just to see what was happening inside.
Sam dealt efficiently when weighing and selling goods, but he showed his nerve when serving a lady who wanted sugar.
He made what we call a poke or a cone and started to get the sugar into the cone. Well, of course, the shop door was open, cheeky lads were all watching, everybody was pressing forward to see what was going on, and of course Sam was very nervous. He was determined to get it right. So he started to get the sugar into the cone, and he concentrated really hard. Off he went. Now, of course, he was concentrating so hard on this end, he forgot the other end. There was such a whoop of laughter from outside, and of course he then realised there was a little cone of sugar here on the counter. Total dismay, very red indeed. However, he had the presence of mind to ignore the sugar on the counter and reweigh it. They only opened 2 evenings a week, of course, because they were all working during the day. Sam and Billy were both flannel weavers. Sam was a very quiet young man. He wouldn't say 2 words, of course, if one would do. Billy was very different. He was known as Roystering Boystering Billy. He had lovely red hair, it used to stick up like a brush, and of course he sat in the corner behind the table to take the money. At the end of 3 months, they'd made enough profit to give Sam and Billy 3pence an hour for their labours, and they actually declared a 3pence in the pound dividend. They then went on to open 5 nights a week. Not Tuesday, because it was half-day closing 150 years ago, and of course it's still half-day closing in Rochdale today.
The pioneers decided that initially they'd only stock 4 items: butter, oatmeal, flour and sugar. With the remaining money, they decided to buy candles, and on the opening night the candles were pressed in service to light the shop, as the local gas supplier decided that a shop this poorly set out could hardly pay for gas.
Of course, the local shopkeepers went to the local wholesalers and said, look, if you're going to sell to this new co-op, we'll boycott you and you'll go out of business. So it was a question of getting a wheelbarrow and wheeling it all the way to Manchester. 12 miles there, 12 miles back.
By the end of the first year, with members up to 100, the takings were £710, 6 shillings and 5pence. The store showed a surplus on its sales of £32, 17 shillings and 6pence. At the end of 1846, the takings were £1,146, 17 shillings and 7pence, with a surplus of £80, 16 shillings and 3pence halfpenny. By 1850, the membership had risen to 600, and the takings to £13,179, 7 shillings. There was a surplus for distribution amongst members of £889, 12 shillings and 5pence. With this growing success and desire to gain independence from wholesalers, the Cooperative Wholesale Society was formed in 1863. In 1873 they began producing their own goods, initially biscuits and shoes, and over the years they moved into numerous other industries.
Of course, they took over the whole of the building in 1849. There were originally 3 floors, but as you can see, the top floor's now gone. But we do have 3 of the original beams along there, and of course 2 of the original supports. You can see that this was originally quite a low ceiling room, and of course it would be a very cosy room. This is where they had their very famous newsroom and library. So you can just imagine it then. It'd be a low ceiling, gaslight, a really good fire going. And by 1862, they were taking 14 daily papers and 44 weekly and monthlies. It was a lovely place to come to. They had a watch club here. You paid 3d a week into the watch club, and then you took it in turns to borrow the pocket watches. They had maps, they had globes, they had opera glasses, they had microscopes, they had a magnificent telescope. They made just a little bit of the roof flat to take the stand, and on fine nights, not very often in Rochdale, of course, they went out to watch the stars. From 1850 to 1855, they had a schoolroom here for their members. The pioneers, of course, did all the teaching. They taught just very simple reading, writing, arithmetic, and then they went on to mathematics, geometry, and would you believe it, political economy. And at the far end of the room, they had their library. By 1862, they had 5,000 books, and a small reference section with about 128 books. At that time, the librarian was Nathan Holt. He was a bookbinder by trade, and of course he looked after the books as well as looking after the people here. There's a lovely line in the minutes, and it says, "Resolved to buy the librarian a pair of felt slippers, owing to his noisy clogs." By 1861, they'd formed their land and building company, and by 1865, they'd actually built 36 houses on Spotland Road. At a later date, on the other side of town, of course, they built Equitable Street and Pioneer Street.
What do people today know of the Co-op?
You know, like old-fashioned place, isn't it? It goes back years ago, doesn't it?
Basically, in our area, the Co-op means furniture, clothes. In Huddersfield, we have the Leos, which is the food part of it.
Do you know where the Co-op started?
Rochdale.
Rochdale.
Yeah, Rochdale. But it's got that big house with Co-op written on. It's got a bridge as well. It says Metro Rochdale, birth of the Co-op.
What about the divvy? Had you heard of that?
Yeah, have I heard of that? I've always had the divvy till they stopped it. I used to have the divvy when it was 2 and 6 in the pound. Those are going back a few days, aren't they?
I think that the shops were meeting places, like you hear of, like post offices were, like while you were queuing up, you had a chat, you know, and they were really a lot better than modern shopping, but again, the ladies that were working, you could take your order in, and then it would be delivered. You know, there was no, because I've thought many times when you're carrying things from town, I can't remember doing this, and when I was married at the beginning, then you realise that your order was delivered.
My mother was definitely a cooperator, although I don't think she knew it. It's just that she liked the way that they got the divvy. So she used to get everything from the Co-op. And they had a branch at the end of Davyham Street, where I seem to have spent all my blinking life when I was a kid, going errands. She used to do a lot of baking, so of course she needed quite a lot of butter and sugar and flour and stuff like that. But she used to try and send me for about £4 of butter and £8 of sugar. And I used to cry because I didn't want to go for all that. It wasn't that I objected to carrying it, it was just that I thought that they think we had a big family. if I had all this stuff to get. The divvy was also my mother's lifeline for getting all her clothes, because we were always nicely dressed, but she used to say the divvy was hers. So if I said, can I go to Jimmy Doug's instead of going there, she used to get upset and say, you know, you've got to go to the co-op. I want the divvy.
By the 1930s, the Cooperative Wholesale Society was flourishing, and the co-op had their greatest support in the north of England, with 1 million members in Lancashire alone. Anyone could become a member of the co-op by buying a £1 share, a rule unchanged since the society was formed 100 years earlier. Every time you shopped, your passbook was stamped and you received a cash dividend on the total spend every quarter.
Now on Divvy Day, she used to get ready the night before. It was quite a day out for her. And when we'd all gone off to school, gone off to work, she used to go into town with the best coat on. And she used to go and get a divvy, and then she used to go round the town. Now, sometimes she used to get a new corset with her money. Sometimes she used to get shoes and lisle stockings. And sometimes she used to get her combs. But however, whatever she got, it was her day out. And then to cap it all, she used to have a meal in town, which was something she only did every quarter.
Today's Rochdale is very different from those dark, satanic mills of old. Apart from the co-op's food retailing business, they're also present in the high street in the form of 350 travel agents, 95 optical branches, 107 branches of the cooperative bank, plus another 500 in-store handy banks. The CRS funeral division conducts 29,000 funerals each year, making it one of the largest funeral services in the country. The co-op are also present under a variety of different trading names. The co-op's long-established interest in the social and educational well-being of their members carries on today. In the Northwest alone, they give financial support to over 100 clubs, societies and groups. The Woodcraft Folk are a national youth organisation who provide a variety of indoor and outdoor activities for children throughout the year. The co-op sponsorship ensures that these activities are open to everyone who wishes to take part. "35 years ago, every street had a corner shop, and many of these were co-ops. Today, with the ownership of the car, most little shops are gone, and supermarkets prevail. Likewise, smaller cooperative societies merged into larger societies. For example, nearly 200 smaller co-ops amalgamated over a period of years to become, in 1991, United Norwest Co-op. In today's competitive environment, the principles of cooperation are just as important as they were 150 years ago. The influence of the pioneers can be seen throughout the world. In Sweden, this monument was built as a tribute to the Rochdale pioneers. Many visitors come each year from Japan, where they have a full-size replica of the original store in Toad Lane. A cooperative in France makes Rochdale wine. This is the original plaque made for display in Rochdale Street in Moscow. And there's even a Rochdale taxi drivers cooperative in Jamaica in the West Indies. 1994 marks the 150th anniversary of the opening of the shop in Toad Lane. As part of the celebrations, events were held nationwide, with many taking place in Rochdale.
As part of the celebrations of the 150th anniversary, the CWS Funeral Service decided to spend £10,000 on refurbishing all of the graves of the pioneers. And they made a particularly good job of Billy Cooper. Billy, of course, as you remember, was the first cashier. And he was not only the cashier, he wrote a history of the Rochdale corn mill. He was secretary for the setting up of the CWS, secretary for the setting up of the Cooperative Insurance Society, and sadly he died before they started up the bank. Well, here we have the grave of Miles Ashworth, and he was the first president of the society. As a young man, he was in the Marines, and he was one of the bodyguards to Napoleon when they took him over to St. Helena. Just farther down here we have Sam, his eldest son, who was of course the first shopkeeper. Such a quiet young man when they started, he was only 19. And in between them is William Ashworth, one of Miles' younger sons, and of course Sam's brother. Now this stone was buried for many years, I think possibly about 60 years, and I was quite convinced that there was a stone here. So my husband and I actually dug it out.
In August, more than 60,000 people joined in the biggest birthday party in the co-op's history at the National Celebration of Cooperation weekend in Rochdale Town Square. Visitors from cooperative societies throughout the UK joined groups from Japan and Austria and masses of local people to form a crowd of more than 60,000 people. In the party atmosphere, to many in the crowd, the highlight was an attempt to beat the world record and tossing the world's largest pancake, hoping to get into the Guinness Book of Records. Manchester University's Mechanical Engineering Department were called in to build the pan, which would use 25 tons of steel. A team of fabricators from Rochdale's twin town of Sahiwal in Pakistan took 6 weeks to build the pan. It was then stripped for transportation and loaded onto 40-foot trailers and sent to Rochdale for reassembly on site. The recipe for the pancake, including the ingredients and method of cooking, was devised by Manchester University's Food Technology Department. The 50-foot diameter steamer unit was to be powered by a giant gas ring installed by British Gas. The batter itself was mixed in a milk tanker from Central Midlands Cooperative Dairy Division. 2 industrial cranes were necessary for this attempt to flip the pancake. Television crews from both Britain and Germany recorded the moment as the huge pan was hauled up for its flip. As the pan was hoisted, pieces of the pancake started to break away. The organisers began to feel that their attempt to break the record had failed. However, after Rochdale Council's Trading Standards Department checked the pancake, they agreed that 3/4 of the pancake had in fact been cooked and flipped, and in fact it had broken the old record by more than 8 feet. On December the 1st, 1994, Her Majesty the Queen visited Rochdale to view the exhibition that was to mark the 150th anniversary. As part of the exhibition, Her Majesty viewed a large collection of banners representing cooperative women's guilds throughout the United Kingdom. The Queen and Duke of Edinburgh were presented with silver medals specially designed for the anniversary. They also received a frame print of the painting, The Spirit of Cooperation, which was commissioned for the anniversary. before leaving the exhibition, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh signed the original Rochdale Equitable Pioneer Society Visitors Book, which dates back to June 1862. The co-op arranged for community artists to work in 2 Rochdale schools on a topic called The Spirit of the Beehive to represent cooperation at its best. After weeks of hard work, the children were to take part in the grand finale of the anniversary celebrations, and children from the local community took part in a specially commissioned play outside Toad Lane.
Right, and you know it, Lily Harrison. Plaster of Paris in your flour, sand in your oatmeal. We all know your tricks. Yeah, we've had enough of them.
You don't get served with sand or plaster of Paris at hospitals.
No, you don't get 16 ounces in your pound either.
Although the year of celebration has ended, the progress of the co-op continues. In the shadow of Toad Lane rises the new headquarters of the Cooperative Retail Society, ensuring Rochdale's continuing involvement in the history of the cooperative movement.